Game of the season, they outshoot, outchance, and most importantly, outscore the Philadelphia Flyers at PPG Paints Arena Saturday afternoon. I'm all verklempt about this one. An exciting game. It comes down to the final few minutes, and Jared Mccann scores once again on a rebound of a Brandon Tanev driving shot, giving the Penguins just what they needed, a go-ahead goal and a 4-3 win, pulling them back even with the Flyers in the NHL's East Division standings. This is Pittsburgh post-game, a little more post than usual here, but we do want to talk about this one, a very important game in the scheme of the season. Yes, I know we're not even halfway through the 56-game slate, but at the same time, the Penguins are playing a team that were 2 points ahead of them coming into this afternoon, and also had a couple of games in hand and still have a couple of games in hand on them in the Philadelphia Flyers. It wasn't a do-or-die situation by any means, but at this point of the season, that regulation win, yes, regulation win, was about as key as it can get if we're talking about stuff that happens in the first week of March. I'm Matt Gajtka with Hunter Hodies of Locked On Penguins and Pittsburgh Hockey Now. And Hunter, you spoke on your podcast on Friday about looking for a bounce-back weekend because that performance on Thursday against Philly was pretty disgusting for the Penguins fans and their players and their coaches. Up 3-0 in the opening 4 minutes, and they lose. They give up the last 4. Well, this time around, they still had to come from behind, so it wasn't perfect. There were some opportunities given up. Tristan Jarry, again, stood up and was counted in this situation, but that's a positive, too, in a lot of ways when your goalie can do that, and you can rely on him, and the offense comes through with 4 more goals. So in a spot where it was a rubber match in this 3-game set, the Penguins do what they have to do, and they can now get a nice little reset here as they head into a series against the Rangers.
Yeah, this was a game they absolutely needed to have. You know, there's not a lot of must-win games during the regular season. This one basically was that. You know, you lose this game in regulation, you're up a creek, I think is the best way to describe it. And yeah, you know, honestly, after that last game, I probably listened to Michel Therrien's rant for about 5-10 times, to be honest, because that performance is exactly how he described it all those years ago. You know, are we going to be happy to play 8 minutes? I don't think anyone's going to be happy to play 8 minutes for what they did. But what a response today. You know, you mentioned, you know, how good they were with just overall. Possession-wise, 54% in scoring chances and expected goals in high danger. They led the way. It was a much better bounce-back performance. Tristan Jarry, again, you said it. He was good. He was tracking the puck well. Defensively, I thought they were better, though they still need to clean up their net front game. It has been terrible, to say the least, throughout the season. But I also noticed John Marino was really good today. And his struggles are not something that a lot of people have talked about this year. He only had 3 points coming into this game, and all of his underlying numbers were in the tank. And you know, a lot of that maybe have to do with playing with Mike Matheson. He's, you know, a lot of people will say that he's a forward. You know, that's gaining a lot of traction on Penguins Twitter, especially. But they put him back with Pettersson today, and you saw the rewards. He plays much better next to him, though Pettersson did struggle. But the defense, it was much better today overall. Matheson was with Ceci, and you know it's something weird talking about in a Penguin season when Cody Ceci has to carry someone on the pairing. But overall, you know, I liked what I saw. And Jared Mccann, you know, what a player he's been since coming back, Matt. 4 points in his last 5 games, 3 goals in those 5 games. He's always been that streaky player, I've noticed. You know, he'll score a bunch. Then you see what happened to him second half of last season, where he's shooting the puck a lot, but it's just not going in. And now he's on one of those streaks again. And you know, he's an underrated player for this team and doesn't make a lot of money either. So I'm really liking his game right now too. And Evgeny Malkin by far had his best game today.
What I like about Mccann is he goes right to the front of the net for that goal. I think sometimes he can get a little bit perimeter heavy in how he plays, and he can fall in love with that shot that he has. It's a great shot, don't get me wrong, but I think sometimes he settles for things from a little bit further out than perhaps he should. But no such trouble on the game-winning goal. And let's go with Malkin next, because you and I spoke last week. We thought maybe he was percolating after the game Saturday night against the Islanders. Of course, then the entire team was terrible on Sunday against the Isles. Bounce back from Malkin, a couple of points on Tuesday, another stinker on Thursday. It's just it's been a little bit disconcerting, but also the underlying numbers, the shot attempt numbers when he's on the ice have been mostly positive game in and game out for the past 6 or 7. So trending upward. And if you look at him, if you just watch him play too, it appears his feet and his hands are moving quicker. And a vintage Malkin goal on the power play to get the Penguins going today. It was improvisational. It was him at his best with that dynamic talent, the long reach, and just the ability and the passion to get to the front of the net and get to where goals are scored. When he's going well, he is just plowing right to the net like we saw today. So to finish that on the backhand, it shows that his sharpness is coming back on the puck. And we just have seen him on a gradual climb. So with Malkin where he is right now, I have no qualms in saying that I feel like he's going about as good as you can expect him to go, all things considered. His age, the fact there was no training camp. I feel like he is back to a level of performance that the Penguins have gotten used to. Now, is he back to his prime? I don't know if he's ever going to get back there or even get back to last year's level. But at the same time, very encouraging, I would say. And to get that chance to play with Jared Mccann, it appears they have something going on too. So positives on both sides for me. How do you feel about Malkin's play recently?
Yeah, he's really been trending in the right direction. 9 points in his last 9 games. That move today, what he did on Brian Elliott, just make him look like a bantam goalie, to be honest. But also, what a pass. I think that was Crosby that made that pass to him.
It was,
and he just froze him right in his tracks. And then Elliott, he couldn't even get over there because he was deked out so badly. But I noticed a lot more jump in his step today. When he's like galloping, like you saw today, he's on his game. And it was easily his best performance of the season. They weren't getting hemmed in. We've seen the Malkin line at times this season get really hemmed in their own zone, and they haven't gotten any offensive chances. But today it was not the case. And honestly, I think they only got hemmed in like once or twice, to be honest. But he's 34. He's going to start some season slow, especially like you said, with no training camp. He's not 21 anymore. Maybe if he was 21 or 22, he'd be having 1.3 points per game or something like that. But, it takes a little bit of time for him to get going. He's obviously gotten going. It was one of their biggest issues at the beginning of the season. It seems to not be an issue anymore. This is more of the Malkin that we saw from last season. Not all the way there, like you said, but, we're getting closer. I also think him with Kapanen, it's a good match. And especially with McCann, he can give the pucks to McCann, and McCann has a hell of a shot. I mean, that's just a weapon that not a lot of players on this team have. And then on the power play too, he was just making all the right reads. And it's a good day, Matt, when the Penguin power play has not one, but 2 power play goals. I think it's only like twice this season that they've done that in one game, it feels like.
Yeah, it's the first time since January 19th and just the second time all year that they've scored 2 power play goals in a single game. Single period, actually. First period. Listening to that game, I listened to it first in the car on the road, and then watched it back on DVR a bit here, and just experiencing that, not seeing it with my own eyes in that way, just via the audio. I scarcely believed it. I felt like I had to go back and watch it to make sure it actually did happen. No offense to Josh Getzoff and Phil Bork on the radio broadcast, but I had to see it with my own eyes. And let's talk power play, because there was something really interesting about the power play configuration, the top unit. Sidney Crosby placed on the left side, the left point / flank. We haven't seen that very often from him. We've seen that more often from Malkin over the years. But, Hunter, I have to say it makes a lot of sense, and I hope they stick with it, not just because of the results. They had 2 just beautiful power play goals, getting some cross-seam passes from the left to the right side on both of them coming from Crosby's direction. So that's encouraging. They have gotten very little of those passes through the house, through the slot this season. And all the numbers say, all the advanced analytics say that if you want to score a goal in the NHL, you got to at least put either the puck or your body into the slot. It's got to go through the slot, or you got to be in the slot to give yourself a great chance to score. Get that goalie moving and force the defense to collapse on you. So promising there. And it's odd because Sid doesn't really use the one-timer very much in his arsenal. He's the guy making the pass usually that leads to the one-timer. So it adds up to me that he would be on his strong side, because if he's not going to shoot the one-timer, then why have him on the right side? So maybe it comes down to comfort for him. Maybe he was just tired of looking at the same bad results, and perhaps Todd Reardon and Mike Sullivan had some influence in changing up that configuration. But I like the idea of having players like Gensel and Malkin, lefty shots on the right side of the ice, because they're both really good shooters off the one-timer, in addition to just any old time they have the puck, like we saw with Malkin today. So I hope they stick with it. I'm glad they made a change first and foremost, because the way the power play was going, it just couldn't continue that way.
Yeah, they needed to make a change. I think that's basically why you saw Sid up there. And I've always been a proponent of hashtag Sid down low, as people always say on Twitter, because his vision from behind the net is basically next to none in the league. I don't think no one has a better vision than Sid behind the net. But also from the point, he makes all those awesome passes that a lot of other players can't at that position. And on that first goal from Malkin, he made that pass from the left point to a shrinking Malkin, and he just freezes Elliott. So, I don't think Malkin would be able to make that pass to Sid if that situation was reversed. But I agree. I do hope they keep it that way. You got 2 power play goals today. You might as well just ride it going into the next game tomorrow night against the Rangers. It worked. But, I'm glad they made adjustments too. I mean, this power play has been needing adjustments for the last couple of weeks with how bad they've played. But I also agree with you with Gensel on the right side as well. Their lefty shots. I want to see them feed more of those Gino bombs, as I'd like to call them, because Gino really has a great one-timer, and I don't think they feed it enough. And I think Sid could be, because he's a lefty at that side, he could be the one that feeds Malkin those pucks. And almost all the time, those create second chance opportunities if they're not going in the net. So I really like that. What's the word I'm looking for? I guess lineup on the power play, and I hope they keep it for this foreseeable future, because I'll be curious to see how they do tomorrow against the Rangers with it.
Yeah, I doubt they change it for this quick turnaround here. They'll play the Rangers at 7:30 special start time on Sunday night at PPG Paints to start that 2-game set, I should say, against the team immediately behind them in the NHL's East Division standings. Let's look at those standings, shall we? Islanders tops with 32 points, Capitals with 30 in second. The Bruins now in third with 29, as they have fallen off the pace, but still comfortably, at least for right now, in a playoff position. Then the Flyers and the Penguins tied with 27 points. Penguins technically tied, but as I said at the top of the show, the Flyers have 2 games in hand. The Pens have played 23 and the Flyers have played 21. So 2 tied for the final spot in the East with 27 points. Then there's the Rangers, the only other team that could feasibly catch them at 10-9-3 for 23 points. The Rangers have won 3 in a row, though, so they are making a push here as we approach the midway point of the season. This is Pittsburgh Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live. This is interactive sports talk, hockey talk here. We have a couple of comments on the YouTube channel. It's Walt Flanagan, as always, has something to say, and he says, I don't even know what to say about these jack wagons any longer. Yeah, it's really tough to predict. It's exhausting, honestly. This was a roller coaster week. The last 4 games, they're up, they're down, they're ugly, they're beautiful. It's the entire spectrum has been covered, I guess, except the middle ground. There hasn't been a lot of mediocre stuff. It's either terrible or outstanding. So they got the outstanding today. Like we said, a very well-earned victory against Philadelphia, even though, as we'll get to, there were some moments of sloppiness. Underwater Levels also has something to say, and he's got a great little Super Mario Brothers avatar, which I like. 4 points in 3 games against the Flyers. Yes, they win the series, if you will, 2-1. All those decisions coming in regulation. Pretty good. Continues Underwater Level. Still wish the Pens could have salvaged a point in game 2. Yeah, you'd think being up by 3, you're at least guaranteed to get 1, but not how it worked out, as we all know. So let's talk about some negatives here, Hunter, because there were some. Another power play goal conceded by the Penguins. That Flyers power play looks dangerous every time it's over the board. So I think they're going to rise up the rankings. The Flyers power play isn't quite as bad as the Penguins in terms of conversion rate, but it's pretty close. It shouldn't be that bad with how they whip that puck around the zone. And also a 4-on-4 goal allowed. So I guess special teams in a couple of ways gives up something here. You mentioned net front. I think that was key to a couple of those goals. Long-range bombs, Shane Gostisbehere and also Kevin Hayes. Beating Tristan Jarry from long range, but also plenty of traffic in front too. Do you see that as a consistent problem here? Do you think that's something that needs to be fixed somehow, or is it even fixable with the personnel the Penguins have? They don't exactly have a lot of crease clears back there. Not that that's that common in today's game anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I do see it as a problem that's been there all season. I mean, Matt, like when I watch them, especially on the penalty kill, there's just players, like opposing players, just standing in front of the net and no one's really making them pay the price, I guess is the way to say it. I mean, obviously you don't want to take a penalty there and go on a 5-on-3, but they're not getting them out of the way. And it's just like you're allowing your goaltender to get screened. So why is this happening? I thought the PK overall, it was better today. I know they gave up that goal with 4 seconds left. But Brian Dumoulin did make a bit of a difference, and I guess we're going to talk about him soon anyway. He was great in his comeback, and on the PK, his long reach is such an asset, and just his big body and his skating ability there, he's able to get to more loose pucks than some other players otherwise could not. He's a really big asset for that unit. But yeah, I just like the net front presence. I mean, and that was very prevalent in the Thursday game. All 4 of Philadelphia's goals, someone's right in front of Tristan Jarry, and he's making all these saves. And then it's second, third, fourth opportunities. Like he can only do so much. He's not God in net here, people. I mean, it's just it has to be fixed. You know, you saw in that Thursday game, John Marino, everyone looked lost today. The one from Gostisberg, he probably needs to save that, but I think he maybe was looking for a deflection. I think that was his thinking there. And then for the other one, I mean, the power play goal, I mean, that he couldn't even see that puck. I think Hayes had that one, as you said. There was someone in front of him, and he just basically, I mean, you can't see it. So they need to do a much better job of clearing the net front, you know, making someone pay the price, like I said, in quotation marks. And just their whole defense in front of their net needs to be better anyway. Because if you look at the heat maps on StatTrick, the Penguins are so good at limiting attempts and shots from almost every area on the ice, except for a couple spots on the point. And then the big glob right in the middle is the,
Yes.
the net front presence. So it's just like, if you take that away, you're almost giving them no goals a game.
I think ideally, even in a perfect world, you're not going to be able to limit chances and shots from every place on the ice. But if you want to give them up, you'd rather give them up from the points and from outside, from the outer edges of the circles, from sharp angles. But it's been a consistent theme this season, whether it is a problem with quote-unquote net front presence or not. There's just been confusion on defensive zone coverages. Penalty kills as well. We saw Mark Jankowski completely running around on the Kevin Hayes goal. He didn't know where he was going. And new player, I suppose you might give a little bit of leeway, but he's out there on the PK, and that's about the only way he can contribute, it seems like, this season. So if he's not going to do that, then he's completely worthless. Not to put too fine a point on it, but he's not giving you anything at 5-on-5. So he's got to be a penalty kill maven in that way. And you mentioned Marino, he and Matheson and Pettersson have all had their lapses recently, leaving the net front wide open. So it's not necessarily about cross-checking a guy or making him eat lumber or anything like that, partially because you can't get away with as much as you used to be able to get away with 10, 20 years ago in the NHL. But also, it's just a matter of getting to the spot first and knowing where you're going, knowing where you're supposed to be. Because right now, it just looks like there's still these key moments of the game where the forward and the defender are trying to communicate, trying to figure out who should have which spot covered. They're not really playing a man coverage situation for the most part. So there's some switch offs that aren't being executed very well. There's still some confusion on this. And I worry about that, Hunter, because of the lack of practice time this season. They're going to have to figure it out during the game or with what Marcus Pettersson was talking about before the game, with some video sessions, some video clips that the coaches send. It's like you have to teach yourself almost. You're not really going to be able to walk through it. Even in a morning skate, there's not going to be too much instruction. That's just not the way it goes in the NHL. So that's what I'm worried about. There's not really that much of an opportunity to go in there and really nail it down and fix it in a practice setting.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, there's not even a lot of off days, just because I think I heard Steve Mears say 14 games in the next 23 days. I mean, they have to learn this on the fly, basically. Yeah, you said it best. And there's just not a lot of time to have these video sessions to go over, like, oh, like what you did here, like this was wrong, like this is like you have to do this moving forward. So yeah, you said it best. I think there's a lot of communicating in game. And I think that was honestly probably the biggest reason as to what happened on Thursday, was that the players just weren't communicating with each other. And Sullivan seemed pretty miffed about that after the game when he said, these are concepts that were instilled upon a lot of these players when I first got here. And to see this happening now, it's just basically saying it's like disturbing. It's not right. And Yeah, I would hope that these get cleaned up sooner rather than later, as the home stretch is basically almost here. We're almost halfway through this. So if they can, like I said, they can just clean up a lot of these areas, especially in front of the net, they're going to win a lot more games, especially in regulation.
This is the second of 9 back-to-back situations. That's right, 9. Initially, there weren't going to be that many back-to-backs. I think it was just a handful, maybe 3 or 4. But with the COVID postponements, remember the Penguins had about 5 days off. So there was their chance to have a training camp part 2, but they still seem to have sorted out their defensive zone issues. But it's not going to get any easier in terms of the frequency of games. Now, it is going to get easier when you talk about the strength of schedule. And that's where I want to go to next year, Hunter, if we could. It's just that I know for me, Thursday's game was a pretty big downer. So was last Sunday's, for that matter. But to see Thursday, for them to squander that huge opportunity, this could have easily been a 3-game sweep for the Pens, and they could have vaulted themselves ahead of the Flyers into a pretty good spot here with the Rangers coming to town. And then we're going to see teams like the Sabres after them, and the Devils, and the Sabres, and the Devils, and the Sabres, and the Devils. So they could be in a better position. They're not in a terrible position right now, but this past week, the past 4 games, feels like missed opportunities there. And maybe I'm just being a little bit greedy. Maybe this team just doesn't quite have that level that we're accustomed to seeing, and doesn't have that ability to rip off long winning streaks. It doesn't look like that's going to be the case, but I was just hoping for at least 2 or 3 in a row. But that's just not in the cards so far. So, but you know what? It could be in the cards after now they get past Philadelphia. New York's playing pretty well, so I don't want to say that's going to be any kind of a rollover situation. But you've got these teams coming up on your schedule in the Devils and the Sabres who aren't going to make the playoffs, especially the Sabres. They're a complete wreck.
God.
There's going to be an opportunity here. A team like the Islanders already has, I think, 10 points against the Sabres this year. So when you look at the standings, I'm just saying you can be pessimistic. You can be realistic about the Pens. You can even be cynical. But keep in mind that they have not played the Devils or the Sabres yet, and every other team in the division has at least gotten a couple of cracks at them. So that's where I'm at right now. After today's game, this was a real lifeline for them because of what lies ahead for me.
Yeah, I mean, you said it best there, but I mean, they have to take at least 6 of those games against Buffalo. You're probably good. I would hope for at least 5 wins against them. Maybe 3 are going to be good games because the Penguins obviously play down to bad competition. They have in the past. But their team is a wreck. I mean, I think tonight on headlines, Elliot Friedman said they're open to basically selling everyone on their team right now, maybe not including Jack Eichel. He's the captain. He gets his say there. But yeah, they're bad. Honestly, I saw a tweet today during the game. They might have a new coach by the time they play for the first time. It is just terrible with that team. But that's a team that the Penguins have to get a lot of regulation wins against. Same with the Devils. They're not going to make the playoffs. There's 32 points up for grabs there. And I think at this point you got to hope for maybe 26 out of 32. Hopefully more. I mean, I want at least.
That's a lot.
I know, but like those teams are not good, and you have to at least I'm maybe doing 2 losses to the Devils and 1 to the Sabres. I mean, you see the Capitals have beat up on the Sabres this year. They beat up on the Devils. I mean, everyone's beating up on Buffalo though in this division. You said 10 points, I think, for the Islanders already. But those are the 2 teams of the Penguins. If they want to make the playoffs, you got to beat the teams below you, especially. And I mean, there's one that comes into town tomorrow. I don't think the Rangers have Artemi Panarin still, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think he's come back, though they still have won 3 in a row. That's still a dangerous team. But I think 20 of their final 34 games, Matt, or 30-something games, are against these 3 teams, over half of their games. So the opportunity is right here for the Penguins. And they got to put together a nice, good winning streak here. Maybe I think I saw someone in the YouTube comments said it as I'm saying this. Maybe 5-6 in a row against Buffalo, New Jersey, New York, and don't forget, Matt, they still have to play Boston 6 more times. I don't think people realize that. They still have a lot of games left against one of the better teams in the division. Who they probably got to take 3 of those 6 games. They play them good at home, but they haven't won in Boston since I was 16 years old, so it's been a while.
It wasn't that long ago, but
yeah, only 7 years ago.
Boy, has it been that long? That is rather crazy. I know Boston's been good, but you'd think they'd luck into one once in a while up there. What do you think about this division? That brings me to a point that I've been turning over in my head a little bit lately, because what we said coming into this year, it's the toughest division in hockey with the reconfiguration. You add Boston to an already pretty tough group of Metro teams, and the Pens and the Capitals and the Islanders and maybe the Rangers on the rise. They still could be on the rise. We'll see if they give it a real run at the playoffs this year, because it's still possible, and they're a young team. It's reasonable they would improve too. But part of me also says, well, maybe it's just a division where everyone is at least kind of good, or at least 6 of the teams are kind of good. Maybe this isn't as strong a division as I thought, because I look at a team like the Flyers. They gave the Penguins a lot of high danger chances in this 3-game set. The Pens got a lot off the rush, especially. And I know the Islanders and probably the Bruins, I would say, are the class of this division. But the Penguins play the Capitals pretty well so far. So maybe outside of those top 2, Islanders and Bruins, in my mind, as far as the teams that play the best as a team, I think overall, it's not like there are a ton of juggernauts in this division either. This isn't like a situation where you have a Tampa at the top of the group, or a Vegas, anything like that. So I think even a team like the Bruins or a team like the Islanders can be had. So I suppose what I'm saying is maybe I'm a little bit down on the division compared to where I was before the season. Have you noticed any of that? Do you feel that way, or are you the opposite? Do you still think this is the toughest division in hockey?
It's tough, but I also agree with you in the fact that there's not like a Tampa Bay or a Vegas team in this division. I mean, for all we know, the Penguins could still get first in this division if they crush Buffalo and New Jersey every time. I mean, that possibility probably won't happen, but it's a possibility. I thought it would be a 6-team race. I didn't think the Rangers would be as bad as they've been this year. I know they've won 3 in a row, but before that, they were not looking like a good hockey team. I still think this is a 5-team race. A lot of people said that going into the year. I thought it would be 6. I mean, everyone knew New Jersey and Buffalo were not going to be good. I mean, I think betting on Buffalo being good is just like, okay, you go at your own wish. But one good team is still going to miss the playoffs here. That's the big thing out of this division, and it's going to be tight like this the rest of the way, especially with all these 3-point games, Matt. And no one wants to win in regulation. Everyone just wants to keep giving points away to these teams, and it's just like, even though they're losing, they're still gaining ground in the standings. The Penguins, they've actually played well against the Islanders, surprisingly, this year, 4-2 against them. I know they had that stinker last Sunday, but going into that, they had won 4 of their last 5 against them. And that's a team that they had struggled against the last 2 seasons, just because Barry Trotz's system really frustrates the Penguins. They obviously have not played Boston as much yet. They probably deserve better fortune against them in one of the games in Boston, but they still have 6 more meetings against them, and they're not playing nearly as well now as they were then. So it'd be curious to see, can the Penguins leapfrog them? Can they take care of business in some of these games and especially get regulation wins? That's the big kicker here. But overall, in the division, I guess I would say, like, I don't think the winner of the Stanley Cup is going to come from this division. I think it's going to be from one of the other ones. There's some good teams, but I don't think there's like that juggernaut. I saw some people saying the Flyers are contenders this year. It's like, I mean, the Flyers are good, but I mean, the team that I watched for 3 games, I don't think that's a Stanley Cup contender. I mean, I don't see it.
Well, here's what's interesting about the Flyers is apparently recently they changed up their forward check. We saw them in this 3-game set be very aggressive, and I think sometimes to their detriment. I don't think it really helped them necessarily against the Pens, but they also generated quite a bit too, so I'll give them credit there. Remember, the Flyers, the first 20-some games of the season, or close to 20 games, they were getting outshot on a nightly basis, not generating a lot, not defending well. So they've gone more aggressive than we usually see Alain Vigneault teams look like. We remember him with the Rangers, especially the 1-3-1, sitting back, just the 1 forward checker usually. Now he's got 3 on a regular basis going into the offensive zone, trying to hunt pucks. It made for an exciting game, even though there weren't a lot of shot attempts, relatively speaking here, Hunter. There were plenty of scoring opportunities in this one. The Penguins winning the high danger scoring chance feud there, 10-6, but it just seemed like every opportunity was a good one, and most of those were great ones. In fact, when it came down to late stages of the game, both goaltenders were getting peppered. It's the type of game that if you're a goalie, it might be fun to play, but also you might wonder, where's my support at times too. So this series was interesting in that way. I think the Penguins match up pretty well against Philly. If Philly's going to be aggressive, it's the teams like the Islanders that tend to clog things up and give them some trouble. I think the Penguins are still better than the Flyers overall. I still give them the edge there. I think the Penguins are better than the Capitals right now. I think they're a tough matchup against or I think the Islanders are a tough matchup against them. So that's why I wouldn't move the Penguins any higher than third if I had to power rank this division. And remember, it's going to be playoffs within the division for the first couple of rounds too. So I came into the year thinking the Pens were either second or third in this group, and I still feel like that. So maybe a little bit more would change my mind. I suppose we'll see how they handle the dregs of the division and how that goes. So you mentioned Brian Dumoulin coming back. We also want to mention that Mark Friedman, who scored his first goal as an NHLer against his former team the other night, he's out with an upper body injury. But the Penguins do have a glut of guys on the left side here, and we've talked about this a couple of times on the postgame show. Ryan G mentions that getting Dumo back helped quite a bit. Marcus Pettersson had another struggling game too. So I continue to be on the trade Marcus Pettersson bandwagon. I think they can get some real forward depth for him. And Ryan G talks about getting a bottom six type of a player. I think they could get more than that maybe for Marcus Pettersson, considering his contract, just over $4 million. I think he signed for 3 or 4 more years. So he's still my number one piece of trade bait. What say you on the whole situation?
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. Dumoulin, you said it just earlier. No, he had his best game of the season today. He hasn't played a lot of hockey the last couple of years. I think I saw a stat now. He's played in like 20 games, regular season games, the last 2 years. He's just been so banged up, and they need this version of Dumoulin if they want to make a run at this. And I agree with you about Pettersson too. I think he probably is their best trade bait, especially if they want P.O. Joseph there long term. I know he was sent down to Wilkes-Barre to get some games in because he's been gassed. But I would think that Pettersson is their best trade bait on the blue line. Maybe you can go out and get, I've seen people suggest Kyle Palmieri potentially for, somewhere in the top 9 or something. You can maybe put a sweetener there with that. But Pettersson's also struggling right now. Today, 3 penalties taken. I mean, that was unacceptable. Just his defensive awareness on the ice was not up to par. And he's playing a little bit too much minutes right now. He's been playing top pairing a lot with Letang before today, but he was also put back on the third pairing and still struggled next to John Marino. And they usually form a pretty good shutdown pair. The latter, of course, Marino had a great game, but Pettersson, I don't know. He's struggled more often than not this season. I think his underlying numbers are also not that kind either, but if I were to say what defenseman is potentially on their way out, I think I would go Pettersson and then everyone else, because Matheson, obviously, that's not even a movable contract at this point.
Yeah, and he hasn't shown enough here yet. Maybe if you had a full year under your belt, if you're Mike Matheson, you can raise that desirability factor again around the league. I think the shine was off his apple going into this season, and he's in a prove it type of a situation here with the Penguins. He still may prove it, and it still may end up being a decent move for Pittsburgh. But I just don't see. I've seen people postulate that, hey, you could trade Matheson. He's playing okay. I think most teams want to see more than 20 decent games from Mike, because you're still seeing some of the defensive lapses, the hockey IQ stuff that pops up. But you're also seeing the upside too from him. I just don't see a great upside from Pettersson. That's what I keep coming back to. Maybe if he was a right-handed shot, you could find some room for him a little bit more readily. But and hey, you were spot on about P.O. Joseph. The Penguins wanted to give him a break, and I wanted to keep him in the lineup because I think he's interesting. I think he gives them a different element. But I also understand that he might benefit from taking a little breather. And now, he's going to get some AHL games because he was sent down to Wilkes-Barre Scranton proper, as you mentioned, as opposed to just the taxi squad, which is a totally different situation. Probably not a good spot for POJ to be in, just to sit there and watch so many games over and over again and just practice with that small group of guys. So I don't want to see that for him. So I suppose next best thing, if he's not going to play all the time, is to have him down in the AHL. All right, so the Rangers are coming in. We can put a bow on this one. Hunter, any final thoughts on that series against the Flyers? I thought it was spectacular at times. Today was a wonderful capper to it. The 4-3 final score tells you it was an exciting game, but we had 3 separate lead changes. We had plenty of rush opportunities. It was Penguins-Flyers at its best. We saw some tempers rise as well. It got me excited for what's to come. I know that third period, especially, most important period of the season for the Pens, They came through, but it was just enjoyable overall to see that intensity tick up. I think it happened a couple of times against the Islanders last week, but definitely today. This had the feel with the afternoon start and everything. It's getting late pretty early around here, to borrow a quote from Yogi Berra.
Yeah, that felt like a playoff game, especially in that third period. The Penguins, they looked desperate, I think was the word that I'm going to use. They looked the way they were pressing in that period, and they weren't giving a lot to Philadelphia. It just that reeked of a team that was desperate for points. They needed that. They had. I mean, I don't know how Gensel was robbed. Right, I think it was a minute a minute before, excuse me, Mccann had his. Gensel was robbed by Elliott. I thought that was a sure goal after he missed the poke check. But they did what they needed to do. That was a fun 3-game series, though. It stinks that they lost that game on Thursday. It still leaves a really sour taste in my mouth, and I'm sure a lot of others, because it would have been a 3-game sweep. They would be 2 points clearer than right now, and the Flyers would still have 2 games in hand. But at worst, with those 2 games, the Penguins would only be 2 points behind them if the Flyers win those 2 games, as opposed to right now, that's a 4-point difference. But, we said on Thursday, you circle that game if they miss the playoffs. Circle this game today if they make it. Those are 2 monster points that could be the difference late in the season. It was great to watch these 3 games. There's 3 more left. I think 2 more in Philly, 1 more in Pittsburgh, if my math is correct. And then, the Rangers come to town tomorrow. I don't think a lot of people know this. It's Hockey Day in America tomorrow. I always forget that it comes around this time, I think, every year. And I think there's like 5 games on NBC and NBCSN tomorrow. I think there's a Buffalo game that actually starts it off, so that'll be fun entertainment. So 7:30 NBCSN, but we'll see if they can start really putting together some regulation wins here and a decent point streak, because boy, do they need one right now.
And they're at home this month. They've played well at home, played better at home than they have on the road, for whatever that's worth in this pandemic year. Hey, there's at least a couple of thousand fans in the stands now these days. So just enjoy the victory and enjoy that, Pens fans, and the quick turnaround like I mentioned. But at the same time, they have kept themselves in it. At the same time, still a lot of work to do. It's not like the first place Islanders are even that far out of the range, 5 points ahead. But there's a couple of teams that are going to have to vault here because of the games in hand situation. The Bruins also have a couple of games in hand on the Pens. So not going to be easy to make any big move in this division. It's going to have to be slow and steady, it seems like, and there's going to be plenty of opportunities here, like we mentioned. Thanks for watching Pittsburgh Postgame on Pittsburgh Sports Live. You can check out Hunter's podcast, Locked On Penguins, 5 days a week, LO_Penguins on Twitter. That's where the content can be found most easily. And please do like and subscribe here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Sign up for the notifications. When we go live. Most Pittsburgh post games are immediately after the final buzzer, not, 6 hours or so. But hey, personal schedules take a toll. At the same time, we definitely wanted to talk to you about this one. I think the most fun game of the 23 the Pens have played so far this year. So long, good night, God bless. We'll talk to you next time on Pittsburgh Postgame.